Hi everybody, welcome to the latest video in our series chronicling our travels across the States on the Trans-America Trail on a couple of Royal Enfield Himalayan motorbikes. We've just left New Mexico and entered Colorado. We've got high hopes for Colorado from a scenery perspective because of the mountains. So let's have a quick look at the map and see where we'll be going. Okay, so here's the map of the Trans-American Trail, and where my finger is shows the little tiny bit of New Mexico that we just did in the northeast corner, and now we're just entering Colorado, and the red line is our route across, so doing almost the full width of the state. We know there are going to be quite a lot of passes, a lot of mountains. We know we're going up into the Rockies, for example. We know we're going to be travelling along and over the Continental Divide, and then once we've done Colorado, we'll be aiming for the state line here between Colorado, which is green, and Utah, which is purple. So here we are in a small town in Colorado called Branson, which is literally just across the border from New Mexico. So it's from here that we start the Colorado section of the Trans-American Trail, and we're just in the foothills. It'll be interesting to see what the trail leads to from here.
Hi.
You two?
Yeah, he's with me.
Two you guys.
Jeff.
Glenn.
How are you?
Good.
So that's our first sort of half day's riding in Colorado, which has been fantastic. Beautiful riding, beautiful weather, just great afternoon. We've made it to the first main town this side of the New Mexico border, which is called Trinidad. And it's actually a pretty big town, pretty historic town, been around since the sort of 1860s when coal was discovered here, and then was big in the sort of railway industry era. I think its claim to fame is being, in the 1960s, the sex change capital of the world, when a Dr. Bieber used to do about 4 sex change operations a day. Quite why here, I don't know, but hey-ho. But that's not the reason we're here. We're here for, obviously we're passing through anyway, it's on the trail, but about 4 days ago, we called ahead and tracked some rear tyres down to get them replaced on our bikes. And the chap, it's Memorial Day today, it's Monday, public holiday in America for Memorial Day. So Tuesday tomorrow, he's open first thing in the morning, he's got the tyres reserved for us. So I'll pop down the road, get the rear tyres fitted, and then head further into Colorado. Well, we've certainly scrubbed our tyres in, as I say, today. Since leaving Trinidad, we've come just slowly but surely upwards into the mountains in Colorado, into the sort of lower range of the Rockies. Some fantastic riding, beautiful views. Actually went over Gardner Pass, which is over 10,000 feet, so well over 3,000 metres. It was really cold, although it had been warm lower down. We were riding past snow, or the remnants of snow. But we are a long way from any town or anything, so we've decided that it's best to make camp. And we found this sort of, at the moment, sort of disused campsite, I assume in the sort of high season, which is lovely. So we've made camp here. You can see our little camp behind us. We've also gained a third member of the team temporarily, a chap called Bob from North Carolina, who was riding the tap with a friend, but the friend's bailed out, so he's on his own. So he's tagging along with us for a few days, which is very nice. So that's us, just as I say, made camp, cook an evening meal, and then crack on further up into the Rockies tomorrow. Well, that turned out to be quite a cold and rather wet night in the at altitude. Obviously, the coldness because the altitude dropped down to below freezing, which was pretty parky for us because we're really not equipped for it. And it was raining quite a lot. But anyway, it's cheered up this morning. So Pete and I are going to crack on the trails. Unfortunately, Bob, our little add-on, he got up a bit early to chop some firewood to try and get a fire started for a bit of warmth. And managed to miss the wood and hit his fingers with the axe, and he's got a couple of really nasty cuts, really deep, which you managed to stem the bleeding with some sort of duct tape, but he'll have to get himself off to a hospital, so he'll have to go another way on the tarmac to a major town. But Pete and I'll crack on. I've just managed to break my selfie stick because everything got really brittle in the cold, so he'll have to put up with me being a bit closer range for a bit till I get another one. So Pete and I'll will move on and do some more trails, see what they're like in case they're too muddy, and do as much as we can, just staying at altitude on the passes. So after our rather wet and cold night camping at altitude, we came down and passed some of the trails once we left our little camp spot, and because of the overnight rain, they were pretty treacherous, turned the sort of surface of the end turned to that brown slippery mud, and we thought probably a bit too dodgy to try those that morning because it was still raining, and it was, to be honest, there wouldn't have been much to see because we were up in the clouds still. So we headed for tarmac, and we did about half a day's ride to where I am now, which is a town called Salida, which is a lovely place. And the approach to it, which I've probably put some shots on the video, was along a canyon in the Arkansas River. In fact, this area used to be called South Arkansas historically, and it sort of grew up again like a lot of the other towns we've been through when the rail, as they put it, the railroads hit this area. And now it's a big, really big sort of sports area. You can see the whitewater canoeing area behind me, and there's loads of whitewater rafting, canoeing, big mountain bike area, lots of climbing, hiking, etc. So it's a really nice place. I think historically it was quite an affluent town, probably still is, but it burnt down twice when the buildings were all made of wood. And then I think towards the end of the 1800s, it was rebuilt in brick, and therefore there's a historic centre which has survived, so we're just going to have a little look around there. As I say, this area used to be called South Arkansas, and was changed to Salida. Salida being the Spanish word for exit, and apparently it was basically because it looks like the river's sort of exiting the Arkansas Canyon, and that's why it was named Salida. Well, that was a great ride up a pass they called Ponca Pass, which was pretty challenging, pretty rocky, lots of streams, or the path became streams, and very steep. Past the snow line up here, but fantastic. We're at the summit now, just having a break and a bit of a snack, and then we're heading off onto a pass called Marshall Pass, which if I spin the camera around will be kind of behind me. Looking over towards, I think if you can see the one with the snow on the summit, over the other side is called Baldy Mountain is called around here. So onwards over that way, but what fantastic scenery, absolutely awesome.
Yeah, the wife and daughter are on ATVs and the dogs are in the camper.
Continental Divide.
You're on it. Basically, anything that hits that way goes to east, west.
Right. Well, we came over Marshall Pass and stopped here in Tabachi Creek, this little trading post behind me, for lunch, and had great grub, and I had elk meatloaf, which was a first. So now we're cracking on over some more passes, a little bit further down towards Lake City. So we had a good camp last night up here on the shores of Lake San Cristobal, which is just by Lake City in Colorado. I don't know if you can see it behind me, but it's beautiful, sort of reasonably high altitude lake. We're at about 9,000 feet, so about 2,700 meters. So we're going to head off today and do 3 of Colorado's high passes. It's going to be pretty good. We're basically riding along the Continental Divide. So if it's anything like yesterday, it'll be great riding. We're still heading west towards ultimately the state line with Utah. I doubt we'll make it today. It'll be a push, and the riding, if it's like yesterday's, is quite technical and quite slow, but we'll enjoy the riding and see how far we get. So we're probably most of the way up, we hope. Cinnamon Pass, which is the first of the passes we're doing. We're at about 12,000 feet, sort of 3,700 metres. So it's pretty high. The bikes are starting to struggle because of the oxygen. Quite often we can't get them out of first gear. And it's also very steep, very rocky, very wet. So quite a challenge. We're huffing and puffing a bit as well because it's quite a lot of exertion. But it's great fun, beautiful scenery. I mean, look behind me. Absolutely fantastic. But the little bikes are doing really, really well. They're a little bit underpowered for this. They're only 410cc, single cylinder, but they're plodding along like little mules. So let's see if we can get to the top. Okay, so we're trying to get over the third, I think it's the third and final pass, which if you look behind me is over, you probably can't pick out the road particularly, but basically over that snow-capped mountain. And I've got myself buried, and a chap just came down a big four-wheel drive and said it's 100 times worse up the top, and we wouldn't get over with bikes. So we've decided to be a little bit prudent because it's high altitude here, it's hard pulling and pushing bikes about. We've got to turn around and try and find another way out of the valley and back to some tarmac.
I came down. You came down. It sucked going down.
Not, you wouldn't go up?
Oh, hell no. It's like that. Go to Silverton. Straight through there. Lovely, thank you. So having found that the final pass to get across the mountain range was actually impassable because of snow, however much we tried, we had to double back. The clouds started to come in once we found the snow. We were deciding whether or not we could sort of battle through, but the clouds started to come in, started to snow, the wind started to go, and we thought it was just not advisable to try it, especially as people had told us it was almost certainly not possible on our bikes. So we doubled back and went to a town called Silvertown, which was really, really nice, just for a quick stop, and then sort of regroup and have a look at the maps. And then because the pass we wanted to go over was the final link sort of thing in the chain of the mountain range that we were trying to get across, we've actually had to take quite a big detour south on tarmac roads towards Utah, the Utah border, where we'll rejoin the Trans-America Trail. And we've stopped in a small town en route at this little hostel, where we'll stay the night and then crack on westwards tomorrow. So we started riding this morning back towards the Tat Trail and towards the area close to the Utah state line, and we found ourselves travelling through the Canyon of the Ancients, and we just stopped at the information centre here, and it's very interesting. It's about sort of 1,000 years old society, Native Americans called the Pueblans, who were agricultural dwellers, very little hunter-gathering, very much more sort of stable, less nomadic than most of the Native American tribes, and they settled in this area. And we're just going to shoot off down the road because one of the areas that we're going virtually through, a little detour from our route, is one of the ancient dwellings. So we're going to have a look at that. So I've come to the Lowry Pueblo site, which is behind me, which is basically a ruin of a community, sort of set of community buildings. It's set in the Great Sage Plain, which, if I swing the camera around, it's about 1,500 square miles of high, dry plains, sort of fractured with canyons, and that forms part of a much larger area of hundreds of thousands of acres, which is apparently the most highly densely populated area of archaeological sites in the States, and therefore the whole of the area is actually a national monument. And this is one of the central kivas, as they call them, sort of semi-underground circular living quarters where they used to congregate. So the Pueblan world was apparently between about 500 and 1300 AD, with this structure being around about 1100, which is quite interesting really, because when you think about it, 1100 in Europe, they were just starting to build cathedrals, so a very great difference in sort of archaeological structures. And one of the things that the chap at the information centre was saying was that there was no sort of metallurgy, there were no metal tools or anything developed here at all by the Pueblans. And he was saying basically the difference between here and Europe was that here the rocks that they were using to build their structures with were very soft, so they could use other rocks, harder rocks, to shape them and shape the bricks of the type that are behind me. Whereas in Europe, where we have we tend to build out of much harder materials, there was that sort of drive, the necessity to find and produce metal tools. But a really interesting comparison date-wise between America and Europe. Well, here in the middle of apparently nowhere, according to our GPS, is the state line between Colorado and Utah. So we're just crossing into Utah. So that ends our time in Colorado, which I think without a doubt has been the most spectacular scenery of the trip so far, the most varied, from a riding perspective, some of the most challenging, but an absolutely fantastic state. Really, really enjoyed it.